So let me introduce the panelists. Viola Akoff, she's most recently known for becoming the first ever Ellen Swallow Richards Diversity Award recipient. She's professor and head of the Metallurgical and Materials Engineering Department at the University of Alabama. Viola. Diane Chong, do I see you, Diane? There she is in the back. Diane is the Vice President of Materials Manufacturing, Structures, and Support in the Boeing Engineering Operations and Technology Organization. She is the leader of the organization responsible for the development and support of manufacturing processes and program integration for the Boeing enterprise. Diane holds a BS degrees in biology and psychology, MS degrees in physiology and metallurgical engineering, and a PhD in metallurgical engineering, all from the University of Illinois. And Wayne Jones, you might not know Wayne. He's a newcomer to this field. Wayne is the Arthur F. Turneau Professor of Materials Science and Engineering at the University of Michigan. He holds a PhD in Materials Science from Vanderbilt. He is a former president of TMS, I ought to be able to say that by now, an AIME, and a fellow of ASM International. And I might add, he's also the only practicing professor at Michigan who I had as an undergraduate. The rest have retired. So, with our panel, what I'll ask our panelists to do is perhaps present just 1 or 2 minutes of their impressions, if you are all prepared to do that. And then we'll open the discussion, and which Wayne will moderate for us. Thank you.
I'd like to say good morning. My impressions of the summit is that I know that we actually literally touched on the tagline or the motto or the theme for this summit, which is the pioneers, the achievers, the first in their field, they succeed and break new ground for the rest of us. I think that each and every aspect of that tagline was covered during this summit. There were some surprises to me, and one in particular is one issue that I think that we really need to work on further, is this leak in the pipeline. I think we have identified some good ways to get the pipeline going, but what do we need to do to stop those leaks in the pipeline? Even with Dr. Dresselhaus' talk this morning, you look at the numbers, where the number of assistant professors or female in physics that you had, but then when you look 12 years down the road, where they should have been approximately full professors, that number was less than half than that. So what can we do? And I think that some of the things that were covered was basically the culture. I think it's changing some, but it's just not fast enough. But I think it's a very good start, a very good summit from my impression from all the different sessions I've attended.
I'm very pleased to be here. Quite honestly, I learned a lot. A lot of it was not new to me, but it's interesting to hear it discussed in the forums that we have used here. I found it very interesting looking at Elizabeth's summary this morning, one of the comments about work-life balance, and it was related to academia. I think it's everywhere. So I think it was eye-opening for me to see the different perspectives that was here. I agree with Viola. There is a leak in the pipeline somewhere, and we're trying to fill it, but what can we do to nurture people along and really make them understand, as with another observation, that these are great jobs and these are wonderful things to be doing. I forget often, and maybe that's an indication of where we are today, of the past and the things that all of us have gone through to get to where we are, because I'm enjoying my job and I feel that I am being respected, but at the same time I need to make sure that the way is paved for others. And I think we all feel that way, and that's why we're here. What can we do to really change things? I agree it's not fast enough. I think the trend is in a good direction, but more needs to be done to keep pushing it in that direction and pulling people along as well.
I did have Liz as a student, and she was very precocious then, and she's still very precocious. also, my department chair now was a former student in my class, so I'm feeling very old. But I would like to see us get to a point that I'm going to illustrate with my niece, who is a first-year student in college, and she spent most of her high school, I think, not studying as hard as playing soccer. She's very, very good at soccer until she had a tragic knee injury, but so now she's studying. And so I asked her, because this small school she went to had a wonderful soccer team for women, and I said, "What do you think about Title IX?" And she said, "Well, I like the catalog. I've never bought anything from them." Don't know, gentlemen, it's a catalog for women's sports clothing. And she didn't know what Title IX was, and I thought, well, that's just fine. That's okay. Title IX helped her out, and it's just accepted now that that's the situation. Of course we have a soccer team. Of course we have other things, and I think that's what we'd like to get to as well. One more personal observation, and that is yesterday in the session on Imposter Syndrome, there were a very good mix of people, men from industry and government, women from graduate school all the way to senior women in universities and industry and government. And the presenter asked us to raise our hands if we'd ever suffered from the imposter syndrome. Well, almost everyone raised their hand, and I looked around and said, Liz Holm is raising her hand? That can't be. Eric is raising his hand? That can't be, and so forth. And it was very interesting, this is a kind of blurring of boundaries that hardly ever happens at a technical meeting. That's why this meeting is so special, is that we go to the TMS technical meeting and we assume a hierarchy. Professors, funding agents, graduate students trying to impress everyone. We come here and suddenly those boundaries are blurred. We're just people with some of the same ideas. I think this is very special. You get to learn more about your colleagues and so forth. So I'm very curious to hear what you've learned, and you should do most of the talking, not us. Is that fair? Or not me? Okay.
But don't forget, we are up to doing all of the talking if you guys don't get up and go to those mics. So it's a self-preservation thing for you to...
That is a warning.
So one of the things you mentioned, Liz, in your closing remarks, and that we talked about, I think in the government sector, was the fact that we have a PR problem as scientists. And this isn't just true of material scientists. I think it's true of all scientists and engineers. We see a lot of representations of ourselves on TV that are maybe a little accurate and maybe not so accurate. So my question is, what can we do as scientists, and what can the professional societies like TMS help us do to improve that image?
My mic, oh, there. I said everyone's looking at me, probably because she said professional societies. But Wayne was a president of TMS, too. That's a really good question. I have very much a sort of love-hate relationship with, like, the Big Bang Theory, for example. Because I'm really delighted that there's actually scientists and engineers, and it's surprisingly accurate about some of the work they do and some of the dynamics, but at the same time, they aren't showing the whole picture. You know, and they shouldn't. It's a comedy. Comedies are about stereotypes, and so what do we do to make kids realize that scientists don't sit in labs all day? Because that's what they think scientists do. They put on a white coat and they go think brilliant thoughts all day, and none of us feel like, well, maybe some of us do. I certainly don't feel like I can think brilliant thoughts all day. I got to do other things. And so what we never tell them is we get to travel the world and talk to people about important problems to the community of humankind and to the world. They don't say we get to have jobs that are valued, that are important, and therefore are also comfortably compensated and with benefits and with reasonable job security, because we're always important. And they don't get to talk about how we have a community that recognizes excellence and rewards it. We need a PR person, you know? We need to go beyond what you and I and all of us, our expertise is, and perhaps get the people who have the expertise in understanding how to change an image involved in this. And maybe that's a job for organizations such as the NSF to think about as advocates of science. And no, well, you know, I mean, I presume as employers you'd like this changed as well, because you want to get the best of the best. You don't want them heading off to Wall Street or heading off to become lawyers. This is a way to try and show that our profession, which in the olden days was of a comparable profession, it still is, and then some. So, but I think we need to go beyond our community to reach out that way.
Add to that, if I may, I think going back to Liz's call to action, I think it's contingent on all of us to go out and speak to a group. If you do nothing else, at least assign yourself to speak to a group in addition to networking and everything else, and tell them firsthand about your own experiences and how exciting it is. Because quite honestly, I think that PR is important, but I think we are the choir. We have to go out there and let people know firsthand. You know, I can't tell you how many questions I get from students, junior high students, when I go out and actually share an exercise that represents what I do at work, how they could apply. You know, they know things already that could be useful because of their math, because of their science. And to have them stay after for half an hour to ask questions is what you want. And we're the people to do it. You know, PR can help us. A PR firm, I've recommended that to certain societies I belong to because they're not, you know, and I've even said, have fewer workshops and spend the money on PR. But quite honestly, we are the choir, and we need to be out there enlisting other singers.
And just some of the things you can take advantage of are things that you're already involved with. For instance, in church, I was sharing this story with someone yesterday. One day I was Viola. The next day, when I got my PhD, my pastor started calling me Dr. Akoff, and that bothered me. I pulled him aside. I said, I'm still Viola. I'm no different. He said, I know that. He said, I want these younger kids to see that you're here and that what you do and traveling the world. And I had one of the kids to come up to me one day, just a month ago, and said, you know, Dr. Akoff, I had never known anyone else a doctor, and started hearing it. And when I kept hearing it, now I want to be a doctor. And I want to go into graduate school. And so just little things like that. And I unbeknownst to me, just him hearing that. And so just little things that we're involved with, we can do. It doesn't have to be a big production. And just they know what you do. They know that you get a chance to travel. And that was one thing even to my undergraduate students. It was unbeknownst to them that, you know, I told them I had the opportunity to give a presentation on every continent except for Antarctica. And that was because, the professor, I did not travel abroad until 1997. That was my first time as an assistant professor. And I, you know, got bitten by the traveling bug and set a goal. And so just little things like that, and you'll be amazed how far it can go.
Let me just say one thing real quick, because I'm a faculty member. We don't do a very good job as faculty, like Dr. Dresselhaus did today, of explaining the joy of our jobs. We complain a lot in front of our students and to each other about how hard we work, how tough the funding situation is, how late we're up at night writing proposals. And yet when those graduate students finally come to a meeting and see how well we live, how interesting we really are, I'm dreaming a bit here, and how many interesting, more importantly, how many interesting people we know and what we do, then they say, well, that's not like what you were talking about back in the office. So I think we have to do a better job of explaining and showing why we're there, because we don't have to be there. but we're there because we love it. And you know, a blue shirt is a wonderful thing for an engineer to have.
And also, don't forget to remind them they get to go to grad school for free. That's a little different, believe me, than medical school, which is my daughter's ambition.
You'd be surprised. I'm still surprised the number of students, they don't realize that they go for free. And I was like, no, if you go to grad school, we pay for it.
Mary, do you mind if we have Millie go next? And thank you.
She can go first.
Oh, after you.
Well, I just have two brief suggestions. We need a list of attendees and email addresses of those
The
willing.
staff is indeed compiling a list of the attendees so that we
Okay.
can contact each other indeed.
Because that would help a lot. We have some pictures in the book, but so we can identify. So that would be useful. What I was missing at this conference was students. And they're the people that we need to hear from, and they can tell us how to do these things better. And many of the societies have student groups, and I always go and participate in the student group activities, all the societies that I belong to. So I don't know that I'm the only one, but you know, other people too. So, and they help me, I help them.
Absolutely. We purposely organized this summit around professional members of TMS, in part because that's a group that we hadn't addressed before, but we do have a good contingent of graduate students actually at this. We did not include undergraduates for the most part. So, Teresa, did you? Yeah, students, please. So, they were very active, I might add, in the discussions. Mary.
So some of you may know that this milieu is my day job, and I'm really so gratified to see that my technical society is finally addressing this in a big and open way, because a lot of the other technical societies have gotten out ahead of us. Not to say they've gotten fabulous results, but they're talking about it. So kudos to us. So I am president-elect of the Women in Engineering Proactive Network, wepan.org, WEPAN.org. If you go to the homepage and click on initiatives, you will find ACE, ACE, Advancing the Culture in Engineering. And I want to take 2 minutes to talk about this because I really believe that this is the biggest game changer that I've seen in my career. WEPAN started 25 years ago, and it was mostly populated by women in engineering directors, and the highest up the food chain it went on the academic side was deans of engineering. There would be deans panels. And then on the industry side, it was college recruiters. And so the numbers moved, and they did good things about equipping the women and putting into place K through 16 initiatives to give women a sense of community. But as we all saw, the numbers are stuck at 20% at best. And those of us who know the numbers in electrical and mechanical and computer science, we know that those numbers are abysmal. Now, 2.5 years ago, the WEPAN board, on which I sit, hired a couple of consultants, and we started a strategic plan that is about to roll out this ACE initiative. So rather than dealing with the colleges of engineering and recruiters, we are going to the C-suite of companies who hire our students and to university presidents who have come up through the engineering career ladder. It was July of last year, I had a discussion with Kansas State President Kirk Schultz. Anybody here know Kirk? Anybody here know Noel, his wife? Mm-hmm. She is a chaired professor of electrical engineering and an associate dean. They're at K-State now. And I talked to Kirk and asked him if he would be willing to lead this effort with some other presidents/chancellors who are engineers by training, and he said, hell yes, let's go. So we're going, and we have now been to some of the C-suites. We're trying to go cross-sector. One of the oil companies said that this was the boldest initiative that they had ever seen. It's going to be expensive. We're asking for $300,000 a year for 5 years, because this is about a $2.5 million a year initiative. I agreed to be the WEPAM president because I want to be involved in this. This is unlike anything I've ever seen. There are universities who have representatives in this room who are involved in this core group of presidents. We've had webinars and discussions, web meetings, I should say. So we're ready to go. We have a new president at Ohio State. He has not even been there for a month. Once he gets settled and gets over firing band directors and everything else, I'm gonna present this to him as well, because I really want him to be involved. So if you're interested, if you want to know more, go to WEPAM, learn about ACE. ACE is based on a collective impact model. So this is mobilizing people who are decision makers. The 4 frames are equip the women, which we've done through our women in engineering programs, create equal opportunity, value the difference, and by the way, when I say women, I mean everybody. I mean all underrepresented groups, because what's good for women is good for all, and then revision the engineering culture. We are in the precipice right now of receiving a grant from a large government agency that will get us started with one of the technical fields that's highly underrepresented, where women are highly underrepresented. I will tell you that on the WEPAN board, it's not just FUBU, it's not just women. Claude Kokini from Purdue sits on that board, and I'm pleased to announce that Wayne Jones has just rolled on to the board. We also have industry representatives who are C-suite people as well. I'm sorry, I should correct myself, just below C-suite, but have access to the C-suite. So please know that this is going on, because we really need to get past the complaining and comparing notes. Now we're ready to move. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is John Madison from Sandia National Labs. I don't think you have to tell a room full of scientists that data is important. I think we all agree data is king. So I have 2 kind of questions about data, and I'm hoping that you all might be able to answer from a maybe society, industrial, and academic perspective. So the first is, since data specifically regards to kind of, ethnic status and, or minority status is not compulsory. Generally, it's very, maybe requested, but not, can't be mandated. How much data do you think we're missing? Because when we're talking about very small populations, I think we could probably make an argument that, even small cases can be very important, either in lessons learned, things that need to be repeated, or things that don't. So maybe how much data do you think we're missing that we're not tracking? And then the second question would be, do you have any thoughts or ways in which we might be able to increase the amount of data we get, right? That wouldn't be a violation of, law or some codes. I'm just interested.
I can say just one thing, and I can't answer the question because I don't know exactly what we're missing, the first question. But I do know that we're not doing a very good job of publicizing the opportunity in a data set of how many PhDs are in the pipeline to graduate who are underrepresented minorities in the country. We all should know that number right now, and I don't know it, and I doubt if many of us do. Who are they working for? What are their fields? And I'm thinking now materials, of course. How can we track them and reach out to them and show them what a good opportunity would be to come to one of our universities or to industry, for example. So that kind of data we can get by networking. At Michigan, the past 3 years, we've had something called Next Prof, where we bring, 1 year we bring PhD candidates and postdocs who are interested, at least profess an interest in academia. We bring them to campus for a 4-day workshop. And the next year we bring underrepresented minorities, men and women. And 2 years ago we had a room with 55 underrepresented minority PhD students and postdocs. And when our faculty walk in that room, and they can't say again, there aren't enough, they're not out there anywhere. They just can't do that. So I think we have a way, we should be looking at data, not of just the numbers of where we are, how we're doing, how we're tracking, and so forth, but who we're missing and what the opportunities lost are as well. It's very easy to track retention or the lack of it once people are in the system, but it's much more difficult to track lost opportunities, people that never got in the system. So that's not an answer to your question, but I think it's part of it. Yeah.
Thanks. My name is Natasha. I'm an assistant professor at Lehigh University, and I'm interested also in this question of data and standardization, and especially effectiveness of assessment practices. In your slides, you mentioned this dissemination of success stories or lessons learned, and I was wondering who can be a leader for collecting and standardization of these lessons learned, and is it a professional society? Is it somebody else? And how can I access that information, especially as a junior faculty trying to think about assessing outreach programs or anything that I'm doing? I'd really like to know more about assessment.
Very good question, and ties back to John's question well, too, I think, Natasha. I do want to say that one thing that came out in the discussions and can't be over-talked is the NSF's data from the advanced program. So with respect to academic assessment of various programs tried, they've done part of the advanced grants had to be assessment, and that information is fully available from the advanced resources on the web. So that's a good place to start. But I think outside of that venue, it's much harder to find answers about assessments. I think that's not something a lot of corporations, for example, put money into with respect to the diversity issues, and perhaps Diane can speak of that. I will say, speaking as a TMS member, I think this is an area where professional societies can offer something. We don't yet. It's not there yet, but as central clearinghouses for the whole profession, I think that in answer to both John's question and yours, there is a role to be played by TMS in being able to collect this data, perhaps even being able to offer some of the data via mining our records, although it won't be an easy job because we've never asked demographic questions until about 3 or 4 years ago. But mining our data and perhaps providing some of the non-academic ends of the data that are currently missing. So Diane, did you have something to add?
I think I think what you said is absolutely correct. I think you can't underestimate the NSF advanced information because of the assessments. Corporations vary, as I recall from one of Elizabeth's slides, and we're all over the map in terms of how well we're doing and what we're doing about diversity. And so it's very difficult to really, it's not impossible to identify what those best practices are, but usually those are held inside the company, and they might be shared externally once a year or something at a conference, at a different diversity conference or something like that. But I think in order to have a consistent place where there's consistent standards, I would look to the technical societies. You know, as a member of industry, I go to the technical society websites often to find best practices or find out what's going on in the rest of the world.
And I'd just like to also throw out there, another thing we can also utilize from the academic side is we have the University Materials Council, UMC. We meet regularly We have quite a few of our members here in the audience. I'm glad to see them here for their support of this program or this summit. What we can do, we can actually utilize that resource to come up with, I guess, have a type of clearinghouse for best practices, sharing for their individual, because you have it, that consists of the department heads from all of the about 120 or so material science programs throughout Canada and the U.S. So that could be one way to actually get some of these best practices together that we can share. So that's another resource that we can utilize.
Hi, I'm Lauren Garrison from Oak Ridge National Lab, and my personal experience has been more with women in engineering events, but there other people from other underrepresented groups may or may not find parallels with this, but my personal experience has been in attending these type of women in engineering events. I've heard from my male friends and colleagues that at the best they feel sort of uncomfortable at that type of event, and at the worst they have felt that even actually a hostile environment for them. So my question, maybe especially towards Wayne, would be how do we make not just these type of activities more welcoming to everyone and encourage more participation from the non-minority people, but also at the individual level, sort of if there's any hints or best ways to even just approach maybe your manager or other people about these type of issues? How do you come at it from sort of the most effective or most positive way to reach other people?
I guess the first thing I would say to your male friend that said, I feel pretty uncomfortable here, is that welcome to the club. It's the way you feel most of the time in a predominantly male environment. So it should make them more empathetic to begin with. But I do have an answer for that, given my longevity here. Anyone in the room ever been to something called sensitivity training? Yeah, okay. It didn't work, by the way. And the history is that when we first started talking about diversity, whether it was with underrepresented minorities or women, men would go to these meetings and be bashed and not go back again, and there would be backlash. And I'm grossly generalizing, but I think that's my impression. And my experience to some extent. The science of how to talk about diversity and how to make it a common problem, not just your problem, for example, has advanced quite a bit, no pun intended for the NSF program. So the question is, well, what makes the person uncomfortable, and is that because they haven't thought about their comfort zone and haven't stepped outside it, or is there something negative that's actually happening to cause that? And you have to think about that too. But what I've seen at the universities is things are much more positive in terms of talking about a common problem that we have, of finding more talent and making sure the talent that we do find can succeed on a level playing field. That's a very positive thing that engineers can roll up their sleeves and say, well, let's fix that if there's a problem. One of the fixes, and not to get too far from your question, is policy. So how do you change, in my case, university policies to make the playing field more level? Doesn't mean it'll be easier, it's just that it's fair for everyone, about the same. So I think that it's okay that they have some discomfort, quite frankly. It's a good thing. But you want them back, and you want all the groups talking about the common problem. So the assignment of blame is gone. It's how can we all work together on that. So, but I sympathize with the problem, and I also somewhat sympathize with the young man who might feel uncomfortable. But I don't know if I answered your question, but the history shows that we're doing better about these things. And I applaud you for trying to be inclusive in that area.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Keith Bowman from IIT in Chicago. So I've spent the last couple of years trying to help people share my opinion that the pipeline is a really poor analogy or a really poor example, and it's a negative example. And so why don't we bury it, okay? But the question that I have is, and we'll see what happens when I fly back today, is on the flight I came in on, I flew with Brad Schneider, Mike Quigley, Jan Schakowsky, and Al Franken. Of those four, Brad Schneider is an engineer, and Brad is one of the very few engineers who's in the House of Representatives. So those are 3 Illinois House of Representatives and Al Franken, who besides being a comedian, apparently he's from Minnesota. But those people aren't here. And there are very few engineers and very few scientists in those leadership roles. So how do we get more people to be a voice for us in those roles? And by the way, Brad Schneider is at risk, so there may not be an engineer from the Midwest in the House going forward. So how do we change that part? Because I think that that's another place where you can see role models and where you can see examples. And by the way, Brad Schneider is an industrial engineer. So.
What kind of airplane did you fly on, by the way?
737.
Yeah, thank you. Teresa should come up here and she is calling from the audience with the right answer, or at least an answer, which is, today is, of course, Congressional Visit Day. Our staff and our TMS presidential rotation, other than myself, are on Capitol Hill right now. TMS is an organization, of course, is involved both in advocacy and to some extent in lobbying for our profession. We fund congressional fellows as well as White House fellows. And that is in collaboration in some cases with other professional societies. So we try to do all those things. I think part of the challenge goes back to what we've already spoken about, which is the PR of engineers. We don't present ourselves as a force to be reckoned with. Part of it, politically speaking, is probably unapproachable from the public microphone, but just the idea that science perhaps is not as valued in government as it once was, when, in the Industrial Revolution and so on, when we thought science would save the world. Science doesn't have quite that image publicly and politically anymore. And we also run into a challenge of specialization. My understanding is the congressmen, Supreme Court justices, presidents even came from many different walks of life 100 years ago, but now they primarily come from a law background. And so that makes it more challenging for all of us. The medical doctors are in the same boat. There used to routinely be medical doctors in Congress, and they're now a rare situation. So that's all my way of saying, I see the problem, Keith. I have no idea what the answer is beyond what we're doing. And if any of you do, get up to the mics. This is a good one to call out to everyone for something new that we can work with.
Well, it seems ironic to me that we're sitting in this room, which is the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Sciences, and maybe a question is, how well is that organization advising Congress and the President, and how well are they listening is probably a better question as well. But when you mentioned burying the pipeline, I'm trying to understand how those two are connected, because are you suggesting that they can fix a pipeline, or?
I'm not suggesting that they can fix the pipeline, but I think that it was just, and I know the three representatives from Illinois because they're all Chicago, and we interact with them. So, and they are supportive of many things, and they would be supportive of. In fact, I was a part of a STEM education workshop with Mike Quigley, who's my congressman, and Brad Schneider. But the challenge is really, they're actually the people who are giving the funding to our funding agencies. Right, they're people who are sending a lot of our education policy, and so that's, we had people from government here, right, but there were people from those agencies and things like that, but are they the people that are really changing what our government is doing?
Thank you very much. I'm Abdul Alabi from Kwara State University, Nigeria. This is one of the first conferences that I will attend and see quite a number of people still show interest even towards the end. It shows that the discussion has been very robust and is sinking with everybody. I would therefore like to suggest that TMS makes an effort to globalize this diversity issue. And we can achieve that by collaboration with engineering organizations even outside these shores. And the American Academy of Science and Engineering actually can midwife this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will mention for your information and the information of the audience that our current TMS president, Hanny Hennon, his presidential initiative is to develop a global federation of material societies, and is initiating that with some talks, particularly in South America, to start off. But TMS has over half of our members are international, and we want to make sure that we have a global presence. And so that is something that is certainly in the works. The other thing I would mention is we hope for this summit to be the first diversity summit, and we hope that future diversity summits address different diversity axes, including the cultural diversity that our profession experiences, both from being a global profession and from the fact that even within the U.S., the workforce itself is global and from different cultures. That's something we didn't get to discuss in detail here simply because we had so much to discuss, but we intend it to be a topic in the future. Are there still, is this a question person?
Yeah,
Excellent.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Natalie Larson. I'm a student at UC Santa Barbara. And I just wanted to kind of review some of the points that were discussed at the Imposter Syndrome discussion and ask a couple questions about how we can use this in this front. So at this meeting, what we were talking about was essentially trying to overcome and cure the imposter syndrome and help people deal with whatever sorts of insecurities or fears that they have. And the cure that we discussed was that perhaps like before a presentation, instead of standing up and thinking, oh my gosh, my hands are sweaty, my voice is shaking, all of the problems, all the things that could go wrong, the idea was to think about visualizing yourself being successful. Even if you mess something up, just don't worry about it and visualize yourself being successful. The fake it till you make it, standing confidently. And I'm wondering essentially if this type of thing can be applied to diversity. So I think almost everyone walked into the room knowing that there are few women, few minorities in science. We know what the problem is. And I'm wondering if starting off a conference, stating the problem and spending a lot of time on the problem primes people's minds to think about the problem instead of visualizing a successful future and visualizing what it will be like once everything is going well and just pretending like this could go well instead of focusing as much on the problem. And I'm wondering kind of if this is a silly idea, if it's silly to just not look at all the data and just kind of know that things are a problem and to imagine and pretend like they aren't, if that will fix it, or if it's still necessary to focus a lot on the data.
I think you should be our opening plenary speaker for the next I think that's a wonderful comment, folks.
I agree. I think that's the vision we're all after, and we said that I think in the Leadership One conference workshop yesterday, is that the day we don't have to have these summits is what we're after, and I think you've just stated it very well. That is the wonderful vision to start things off with.
Dr. Dresselhaus would like to say something. Oh no,
I had the same experience in answer to your question. I used to give many talks on diversity and the pipeline and all that kind of thing. And I looked at my collection of view graphs when I was invited to this conference, and I couldn't find any because I haven't given a talk on this topic for a few years now. So yes, I think something is happening because, well, I'm just one example. Maybe some of the others want to discuss this too, but I used to give many talks, and now I'm not asked to give talks anymore. So it's like problem solved. I know it is. Something is improving.
Well, what your statement, we've heard many times at the University of Michigan of don't show me the data anymore, tell me what you're going to do, or tell us what we're all going to do. There's some people in the room who know quite honestly how difficult it was only 10 years ago to actually get that data. It wasn't kept, so to speak, in a way that could be used by management or administration to see the progress that had been made. And so I think there's still sort of a remnant. You must look at this data so that you appreciate it uniformly. But I think you're quite right. Your point's well taken. It's mainly focused on what can we do, not where we are, because we know where we are and we know we're not where we need to be. So how do you get to the next points? I think that's a good point.
Carol?
So I wanted to go back to Winnie's question, and not just what we can each individually do, but what can we collectively do. And so Liz, you've given us 2 homework assignments. Mm-hmm. Can I suggest one additional one? And that is that we do those things and then report back to you. Ooh, yes. So you can compile all the information, including our names, to say what we did and what our next steps are.
Excellent. The value of peer pressure again. I approve of it. I actually thank you, Carol. You've given me the opportunity because I was going to say, right now, write down that one thing you're going to tell your boss, whoever that person may be, your manager, your director, your department head. Write that one thing down, just a couple words. You're going to ask for better gloves. You're going to ask to have a research group founded, whatever it may be. Write it down right now. Write it. And write down the name of that person you're going to contact. Who is it from this conference that you're going to want to just have some kind of follow-up with? Write them down, and then listen to what Carol says. Do those things, and tell me about it. You can find my email address easily. Just email it back, and we will make sure that this gets put together as part of the outcomes. But also it will be a resource for people who need inspiration, who need ideas about how to get things done in their own organizations. There's nothing that helps someone realize something is achievable like seeing it achieved elsewhere. And it also gives you ammunition to make the next changes, to tell your boss or whoever is your superior, or yourself for that matter, to justify your own actions, to say, this is how it's done now. This is the mainstream. Let's do it. So thank you.
I really like that approach because we're all competitive to some extent, and when we have it all together, we say, well, this is what they do at the University of XYZ, or this is how they do at this company XYZ, and you go to their boss, and and I think that's a really great idea to do that and to state where it's coming, who provided that information. So thank you for that.
Millie has one more comment. And then, unless there are press, I think that was a wonderful way to conclude. And Millie?
We need to have a timeline. You want to have our input by so-and-so time, and then you're going to work on it.
Well, talking to your boss, as you might remember, the assignment is due next week. And some longer, as well as your brief follow-up with the person that you're going to follow up. It's next week, the end of next week, whatever that date may be, Friday, close of business, COB, as we say in the government.
Can I have the last comment, Liz?
Okay, and then your feedback to me is due the following week. But I'll give you an additional week for summer vacation, if you wish, so end of August. Yes, Teresa.
I want to follow up on Natalie's comment, as we're following up on Winnie's comment here, which is, by the time we have the next meeting, can we have some long-term visionary goals with deadlines?
Yes.
And Liz, your homework is to convene the committee, hopefully a very youthful one, that can help you with that.
Yes, we are already making plans for convening for convening the organizing committee to follow up on this conference, and of course, that will set our next steps for the next one. And we will take your wise words as the starting point, Teresa. So I think I'm going to, this is the time I promised you we would finish up. It's 11:30. I have to go to the podium and look at my computer to see if the staff have me making any comments. So Wayne, why don't you thank the panel while I do that? He thanked them quietly. There are indeed a lot of comments that they want me to make. I'm not going to, sorry. The main comment really is that we hope that this was something you found worthwhile. It certainly was extremely gratifying to me, and I learned a lot. I met a lot of people. I had a great time, and I hope you did as well. And I hope you go home not just with good feelings, not just with a week of affirmation and the freedom to think about things that so often are pushed behind you, but also with some concrete things that are action items for you to help you as you progress through your careers. But it is incumbent upon me to do one more thing, which is thank our sponsors and endorsers. And Justin, do you have that slide just so we can see it one last time by any chance? We had support from a wide variety of organizations that I put Justin on the spot to find, in industry, in government, in academia. Among our fellow professional societies, we received financial support, we received support of resources, and I want to make sure we leave with their logos in our mind. We talked about them at the opening ceremony, but they have been absolutely vital to the success of this summit, and I applaud all of them for their commitment to this cause. And I'm not going to let you go till that slide is up on screen. I'm obviously a new professor. I can't just keep talking. There we go. This is the website. This is the bottom of the website. Of course, TMS, our home organization, the co-sponsors, AIME and SME, NAE, SWE, and DOE. Our corporate partners, Battelle, Newmont, Caterpillar, Ford, and Timken Steel, the new Timken Steel. And endorsing organizations include a wide variety of our fellow professional societies. So please keep in mind as you go from this conference that this is an effort that was brought together by the community at large, and we thank all of those participants for their support. And now let's give everyone, yourselves, our speakers, our sponsors, co-sponsors, and endorsers, and our staff, a round of rousing applause, and get up. Go forth to your workplaces, do your assignments, and I will see you in 2 years at the next summit. Thank you.